Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Typing Tuesday. Today, we will take a closer look at copyright and fair use. Let's start with copyright. Imagine you drew a really cool picture or wrote a fantastic story. Copyright is like a superpower that protects your creation. It means that you have the right to say who can use, copy, or share your work. It's like putting a big, invisible shield around your creation that says, "Hey, this is mine, and you need my permission to use it." Now, onto fair use. Fair use is like a special rule that allows people to use parts of your creation without asking for permission in certain situations. It's like borrowing a small piece of someone's creation to talk about it, teach with it, or even make something new from it. But there are rules to follow. Fair use isn't a free pass to do whatever you want with someone else's work. It's more like borrowing a cup of sugar from your neighbor to make cookies. You can't take the whole jar without asking, but a little bit for a specific purpose is okay. So, in a nutshell, copyright protects creators, while fair use gives others some flexibility to use parts of those creations in certain situations, as long as they're respectful and follow the rules. Next, you will see a short video that will explain this a little more. After that, stay tuned for a short video on Anime Club and This Week in History. See you all next week and have a nice day.
When we go on the internet, it's common to scroll through other people's images, videos, writing, and artwork. We might even want to use them for projects in school or at home. And we might think, I found it online, so it's mine. But that's not the case. We can't treat things we find online like a free-for-all. The good news is that there are legitimate ways to use material we find online. But first, we need to be aware of three concepts: copyright, public domain, and fair use. Why is all of this so important? For one, there are legal reasons for protecting everyone's creative work. And there are also ethical reasons to give credit to the people who create the things we see and find online. Let's start with the legal reasons why we should think twice before copying and using someone's work. The first is copyright. Copyright is a legal protection that creators have over the things they create. Copyright requires people to get permission before they copy, paste, alter, or share what someone else has made. Most things that we find, download, and copy and paste from the internet are copyrighted. This means that the people who created them own the content and have a say in how they're used. But that doesn't mean that everything on the internet can't be used. Some creators indicate that their content is okay to be used by others, and other content might fall under what's called public domain. Let's look at what public domain means. When we search for content that's in the public domain, it means these creative works are not copyrighted and are free to use without permission by anyone, however they want. According to US law, some content becomes available as public domain after a certain number of years have passed since its creation. There are also specific images and documents published by the government that are considered public domain. So, when in doubt, search public domain to find a ton of things that are totally free to use. Now, if we want to use a photo, a video, music, or other content that's copyrighted, there are still a few things we can do. We can simply reach out and ask the creator for permission. Many creators are happy to give permission to reproduce their work, as long as they're given credit. The third concept to take advantage of is called fair use. Fair use allows us to use copyrighted work without permission, but only in certain ways and in specific situations. These conditions involve 4 areas to consider: amount, purpose, nature, and effect. First, we can only use a small amount of the original work. This means someone can't copy the whole copyrighted song in their dance video, but they can use a short clip of it. Second, there has to be a new purpose in the project, meaning that we transform the original work into something new and different. Next, it's easier to claim fair use if the nature of the original work is non-fiction or based in fact, rather than creative or fictional. And finally, we need to ask ourselves whether the effect of the new work negatively affects the creator or the value of the original content. For instance, are we charging for or making money off someone else's work? Claiming fair use is determined on a case-by-case basis, but it's more likely acceptable if it's 1. For schoolwork and education, 2. For criticizing or commenting on something, 3 for news reporting, or 4 for comedy or as a parody of something. We can think of fair use kind of like a square and ask ourselves, is it fair and square? So that's the legal stuff. But let's not forget the ethical considerations when using content found online. Think about it. If you created something original and put it online, wouldn't you want others to give you credit for your work? What if they changed it or made money off it and no one knew you were the original creator? That's just not right. So remember, when we go online in search of things to use, keep these 3 concepts in mind: copyright, public domain, and fair use. We're all creative thinkers and creators, and it's always important to give credit where credit is due.
That's one of the more rousing intros we've had for our anime. In honor of Girls' Day, which took place on Sunday, March 3rd, this week we present an episode of that great musical anime, K-On! It's a wonderful mix of humor and music. And our primary characters, we've got Ritsu on drums, he's got Mugi on keyboards, Mio, who's basically all the girls in the school have a girl crush on her, and then also Yui on lead guitar and also lead vocals. If you've not seen this anime, I can highly recommend it as an anime buff myself. Like I said, it's funny, it's humorous, it's great music throughout. They play a lot of great music when they're not eating snacks and basically just goofing around. And all the characters definitely are very three-dimensional in terms of who they are and their quirks and everything else. So highly recommend it. Also coming up on Wednesday, 2:45 to 3:30, Craft Club at Wellness Center, hosted by our very own Miss Hanel. So come and see what kind of cool things you get to create in her club. Also on Wednesday, some busy Wednesdays here at Washington Middle School, the STEM Club, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Talk to your science teacher. It's going to be held in Miss Brodeur's room at 108 from 2:45 to 3:45. Yearbook Club, also on Wednesday, 2:45 to 3:45 in room 202, which is Miss Yamanishi. So kind of get a heads up for what our yearbook is going to look like for the end of this year. Make sure you get all those signatures ready. And also this Friday, our very own Puzzle Club, something relatively brand new club hosted by Miss Velasco. Check out what kind of cool puzzles that they have there. And that'll conclude this week in my announcements for Anime Club and others. And stay tuned for This Week in History. Thank you very much for viewing. Hello and welcome once again to This Week in History. I'm your host, as usual, Mr. Simonton. All right, March 3rd, this happens in Japan, this actually happened yesterday, is Hinamatsuri, a doll festival or Girls' Day, a day people pray for the happiness and healthy growth of girls. Families with young daughters mark this day by setting up a display of dolls inside the house. Actually, that takes place the prior week. A practice begun during the Edo period, around 1603 to 1868, as a way of warding off evil spirits. You can see it's even depicted in anime, my favorite anime, Non Biyori, showing Ren basically experiencing that. And you can see the doll display there, and those dolls can easily cost over $2,000, so it's definitely an investment. Over on the right-hand side, you see part of some of the festivals that's done, some of the older parts of the country or the more rural parts, where young girls make paper dolls and place them in boats and put them in the river, and then the river or the sea is supposed to float to their evil spirits away so that they may have good luck for the rest of their lives. March 3rd, 1913, another dark part in American history, a women's suffrage march. It means that they're requesting the right to vote. In Washington, D.C., was attacked by angry onlookers while police just simply stood by. The march occurred the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. Many of the 5,000 women participating were spat upon and struck in the face as a near riot ensued. Secretary of War Henry Stimson then ordered soldiers from Fort Myer to restore order. It's kind of disappointing that half of the population of the United States didn't get a right to vote until 1920. This happened 7 years later that women finally get the right to vote. March 4th, 1681, King Charles II of England granted a huge tract of land in the New World to William Penn. He owed him a lot of money and said, hey, how about if I give you land instead to settle an outstanding debt? The area later became known as Pennsylvania and home to my Pittsburgh Penguins. They're not doing so well this year. March 4th, 1933, newly elected President Franklin D. Roosevelt took office and delivered his first inaugural address. And this becomes the first of 4 inaugural addresses, because he's elected 4 times, attempting to restore public confidence during the Great Depression. It's a period of history that both of my parents lived through. Stating, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And now you're going to hear an excerpt from that inaugural speech.
And I am certain that on this day, my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
And then 8 years later, we'd be pulled into the most destructive conflict in all of human history. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was still there to try to lead us through it. March 4th, 1940, something a little bit more positive here. Congress and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, here he is again, created a new national park to include the glacially formed splendor of Kings Canyon. I've been there countless times. You can also ask Mr. Perez, he's been there quite a few times himself. The newly established Kings Canyon National Park brought General Grant National Park into it. And here's one of my favorite places in the Sierras. This is a place called Ray Lakes. It's a series of about 5 or 6 lakes. And this is the view looking north. You have Mount Gould, the Painted Lady. And this is how you get into it, is through Glen Pass. You come down there through this snowfield and work your way down here through the ridge here, finally come down to the lakes, and then you work your way around. There's another favorite place. To me, it's probably one of the best views in all of the Sierra. It's called Doozy Basin. And this is basically maybe 1/5 or 1/6 of the views that are there. And Bishop Pass, where you access the basin, is over here to the left. You have Mount Agassiz, Mount Winchell, and Thunderbolt Peak. Boy, I wouldn't have wanted to have been there when that got named. March 5th, 1770, the beginnings of the American Revolution. The Boston Massacre occurred as a group of rowdy Americans, aren't we always, harassed British soldiers who then opened fire, killing 5 and injuring 6. The first man killed was Crispus Attucks, an African American. British Captain Thomas Preston and 8 of his men were arrested and charged with murder. Their trial took place in October with colonial lawyer John Adams, yes, that John Adams becomes our second president, defending the British. Captain Preston and 6 of his men were acquitted. That means they were found innocent. 2 others were found guilty of manslaughter, branded. They actually had their hands branded, and then were released. What we see here is a couple of depictions. Probably the most famous depiction is the one here on the left, which was, I forget the name of the artist, but I know Paul Revere in his paper, he wound up basically stealing the image and published it himself without giving copyright information or copyright credit to the man who actually created it. And it's filled with actually many falsehoods. It shows Captain Preston here behind his men, all the crowd here with nothing in their hands, basically being shot at. Why the dog is included, I have no idea, but I love dogs. But this is a more accurate depiction that the men were completely surrounded. You have Captain Preston out in front of his men, as he stated in his testimony, warning his troops not to fire. Now, they were armed with clubs, cudgels, they were throwing snowballs, but as you can see a snowball here, but here's one of the things. Most of these snowballs, they had bricks or rocks encased in them, so they were not the innocent snowballs that we get when we have these childhood snowball fights. So it's good that actually Captain Preston and most of his men were acquitted. And John Adams, he was vilified for defending the British, but in the end he was found correct. March 5th, 1868, the United States Senate convened as a court to hear charges against President Andrew Johnson during impeachment proceedings. Seems to be a lot of that going on these days. The House of Representatives had already voted to impeach the president. The vote followed bitter opposition by the radical Republicans in Congress to Johnson's Reconstruction policies. He was very liberal, mentioning that he was from Tennessee. However, the effort to remove him failed in the Senate by just one vote, and he remained in office. Bill Clinton also, I believe, was acquitted by also just one vote. And give you some idea just how bad he was, this is the results of Siena College, which is a presidential survey, about 240 different scholars. And you notice since 2002, he is considered to be the worst president we have ever had in our nation's history. March 5th, 1946, the Iron Curtain speech was delivered by Winston Churchill at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. Churchill used the term to describe the boundary in Europe between the free countries of the West, you see them depicted here in blue, and the nations of Eastern Europe under Soviet Russia's communist control. And one thing you'll note here is that Germany has been split in two, part of it controlled by the communist Soviet Union and part of it controlled by the Free West. And here's all the barbed wire that they had put between those two. You can see the boundary here, the Iron Curtain had fallen down between the East and the West, and it didn't finally end until about 1991. March 6, 1836, we're going to be studying this in American history pretty soon. The Alamo fell to Mexican troops led by General Santa Anna. The Mexicans had begun the siege of Texas Fort on February 23rd, ending it with the killing of the last defender. Actually, there were only 5 survivors, 2 women, 2 children, and 1 African-American slave. Remember the Alamo became a rallying cry for Texans who went on to defeat Santa Anna in the Battle of San Jacinto in April. Now, this is actually not a photograph, but it's a still from a film, The Alamo, starring Kirk Douglas and also John Wayne. And here we have the depiction of Davy Crockett basically defending the Alamo to the end. He was also killed in the combat. March 9th, 1864, one of the best decisions that Abraham Lincoln ever made. Ulysses S. Grant was commissioned as a lieutenant general and became commander of the Union armies. And in his stead in the South, William Tecumseh Sherman also took command of the Southern armies. And together they both contributed to the end of the Civil War. Notable birthdays. You got a cell phone in your pocket, you got to thank this man. March 3rd, telephone inventor Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. Bell and his father were involved in teaching deaf persons to speak. Bell developed an interest in vibrating membrane as a method of electrically transmitting sounds to the human ear. His very first sentence spoken on the newly invented telephone on March 10th was to his assistant, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want you." And it was actually because of an accident. He wound up spilling a jar that had acid onto himself, so he needed some assistance really quickly. Next, go Irish. American football legend Knut Rockne was born in Voss, Norway. He coached the Notre Dame football team for 13 seasons, amassing an overall record of 105 wins, 12 losses, and 5 ties. He became famous for his locker room pep talks and saying, "Win one for the Gipper." Regrettably, he was killed in an airplane crash on March 31st, 1931 in Kansas. We're going to hear one of his famous speeches here later on in the presentation. Next, on the 5th of March, we have Renaissance genius Michelangelo. He was born in Caprice, Italy. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, poet, and visionary. Talk about a Renaissance man. Best known for his fresco on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and his sculptures of David and the Pietà. March 7th, we have Stephen Hopkins. He was born in Providence, Rhode Island. He was the state's colonial governor, and he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, he was the second oldest signer to the Declaration of Independence. Ben Franklin was slightly older. On March 9th, Amerigo Vespucci. This is how we get North and South America. It's where we get our names from. The Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci was born in Florence, Italy. He explored South America and the Amazon River, believing he discovered a new continent, in which he did. In 1507, a German map maker first referred to the lands discovered in the New World as America. And then lastly, very famous in the history of space exploration, The Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin was born in Kazakh, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that too badly, Russia. On April 12, 1961, he became the first human in space, orbiting in a capsule 187 miles above the Earth's surface in a flight lasting 108 minutes. His space flight caused a worldwide sensation and marked the beginning of the space race between the United States and Russia. And that is it. Got a picture there of Notre Dame Stadium. That's it for This Week in History. I'll leave you with this one last request. Take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else. We'll see you again next week, and I'll leave you with this speech from Rudy. What about one of Knute Rockne's most famous speeches? All right. We'll see you again next week.
We're going to go inside, we're going to go outside, inside and outside. We're going to get them on the run, boys. Once we get them on the run, we're going to keep them on the run. And then we're going to go, and we're not going to stop until we get across that goal line. This is a team they say is good. Well, I think we're better than them. They can't lick us. What do you say, man?